I'm confused. I just watched this entire episode, and I still have no idea which one of these doofuses on Gideon is named Mark. This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Mark of Gideon. If you have not seen this episode, and you don't want to know why massive outbreaks of deadly diseases can sometimes be good things, I guess, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Yes, here we are once again in Season 3 of Classic Trek, where the uniforms look great, and everything else is pretty much the shits, especially the scripts. Let's see what happens in this one. The Enterprise has arrived at the planet Gideon, home to a race of stubborn isolationists who refuse to allow off-worlders to visit and even block ships from scanning the surface. Despite their reclusive ways, the Federation has been aggressively courting Gideon's membership. Apparently, it's a really nice planet, a paradise even. After lengthy negotiations, the government of Gideon has agreed to allow a single representative of the Federation to beam down. That representative? You got it! Our boy Captain Kirk. Spock personally operates the transporter as Kirk beams down to Gideon, only Kirk doesn't beam down to Gideon. He materializes right back in the transporter room, or so it seems. Confused, Kirk calls Spock on the intercom to complain about the transport not completing, but he gets no answer. He goes to the bridge and finds it empty. He calls engineering and gets no answer. The entire ship is suddenly deserted. Kirk checks the clock and realizes that he's suffered a memory loss and has several minutes of missing time, during which he somehow bruised his arm. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, everything seems fine, and everyone is where they're supposed to be. Except Captain Kirk. Hoden, the Gideon ambassador, calls to ask what's taking Kirk so long to arrive. Spock's like, I beamed him down to you myself. He's not there? And the ambassador says, no, he's not here. We gave you the exact coordinates. If he's not here, that's your fault. It's not our fault. You'd better not be saying it's our fault. Spock's like, just let me beam down to look for him. But Hoden says, nope, not gonna happen. We'll check around and see if we can find him, though. Bye. And he hangs up. Spock stands there staring at the view screen like, you know who I hate? Diplomats. They're the worst, am I right? Spock tells Uhura to contact Starfleet, and he orders Sulu to start scanning nearby space for any sign of the captain. Meanwhile, on what is now obviously another Enterprise, an empty Enterprise, Kirk wanders the corridor trying to figure out what's going on. Then he runs into this woman, Odonna, who doesn't remember how she got here or even what planet she's from, but she knows she loves it because the planet she comes from, whatever planet it might be, definitely not Gideon, is so overpopulated that solitude no longer exists. Everyone is all crowded together, everywhere you go. Kirk and Odonna go to the bridge, where Kirk notices that they are suddenly no longer in orbit around Gideon. He's not sure where they are, in fact. Back on the real Enterprise, Ambassador Hoden calls to tell Spock, hey, we looked around for your captain, and he's definitely not here, so that's good news for you. You can cross our planet off the list and go look somewhere else. Okay, bye forever. But Spock stops him and again requests permission to beam down personally to search for Kirk. Hoden says, your transporter sent your captain God knows where last time you used it, and you want to risk such a thing happening again? Oh, no, no, no. Scotty is standing right there next to Spock, and he gets all fired up. If you think my transporter is the cause of this, beam me down there right now, and I'll prove him wrong while I whip his ass! Spock and Hoden come to a different arrangement. To verify that the transporter is operating properly, the Enterprise will beam up a member of Hoden's staff, this G. Gordon Liddy-looking dude here. So, they do that. Scotty beams the guy up, and he materializes on the transporter pad like, it is I, the G-Man! Please don't look on my son's computer! Spock informs Hoden of the successful transport and says, okay, my turn, I'm coming down there. But Hoden says, not so fast, ya master negotiator. I agreed to have one of my people beamed up. I didn't agree to let you beam down. Ha ha! Now beam the G-Man back down here. He's filming a guest spot on Airwolf tomorrow. Meanwhile, back on the empty prize, Kirk and Odonna are getting to know each other better. Odonna likes looking at the stars through the view screen. She says, it's so peaceful and beautiful. Then she turns to Kirk and says, meaningfully, and we're alone. Can you make it last? Kirk's like, I dig what you're laying down, baby. Yeah, I can make it last. How long do you want it to last? She says, forever. And Kirk's like, Jesus, who do you think I am, Sting? Then they have sex, discreetly during the commercial break. But before we go to the break, as Kirk and Odonna share their first kiss on the bridge, we look at the view screen behind them, where suddenly the elders of Krypton are watching them. Pervy old bastards. That's right, get a face full, you big giant heads. Emerging from Kirk's cabin together after their quickie during the commercial, Kirk and Odonna hear a strange sound. A sound Kirk insists shouldn't be coming from the Enterprise itself. They go to a viewport to look outside, but when Kirk opens it, they see a crowd of people standing outside staring in. A moment later, the people disappear and a starfield is visible, but both Kirk and Odonna saw the people. Kirk starts thinking out loud, trying to deduce what's happening, but Odonna says, "Why don't we just not worry about it and stay here?" As Kirk and Odonna start to argue, we cut to the council chamber on Gideon, where the G-Man, Hoden, and Lex Luthor are watching Kirk and Odonna on a monitor. Who is that clean-shaven bald guy anyway? He doesn't do anything, he just sits there. So do these other two bald guys. Who are they? Is one of them Mark? Odonna suddenly becomes weak. She says to Kirk, "Is this what happens when you get sick?" And she passes out. Hoden's like, "That's our cue," and he and the others stand up and walk out. As they go, they pass by a window where we see a crowd of people aimlessly milling about. Sure seems crowded on that planet Gideon. Hey, wait a minute! Kirk catches Odonna in his arms and carries her out into the corridor, where Hoden walks up with a couple of guards and says, "We'll take it from here. Thanks for making her sick. We appreciate it." Hoden takes Odonna to Kirk's cabin and places her on the bed, where they have a fun little chat about what symptoms she can expect before she dies. Then Hoden meets with Kirk in the hallway, where Hoden explains that Odonna, who is his daughter, by the way, has been infected with space meningitis, a disease Kirk once had. It's fatal within 24 hours without treatment. Hoden says, "We know. Our Prime Minister heard during our earlier negotiations that you survived it. That's why we specifically requested that you be the Federation representative to beam down, so we could draw your blood," sorry about the bruise, by the way, we don't really have doctors down here, "and use the space meningitis germs in your blood to infect Odonna." They move to the council chambers, where Hoden elaborates. See, Gideon used to be a paradise, exactly as it was described to the Federation. Its atmosphere is free of germs. Its environment allows people's bodies to regenerate and attain a state of physical perfection. Lifespans are incredibly long. Death is rare. As a result, the population ballooned out of control, so that now the planet is dangerously overcrowded. They abducted Kirk to acquire his space meningitis germs, which they can now use to start making some room on this planet by killing off their people. On a strictly voluntary basis, of course. Kirk's like, "You're introducing a deadly infection into a society with no disease resistance as a form of population control? Why not just encourage people to get vasectomies or have their tubes tied?" Hoden says it wouldn't work. Every organ naturally renews itself. So Kirk's like, "Then what about birth control? Get people on the pill. Tell the ones with dicks to wrap that shit up. It works. Trust me, I fucked up once and I swore it would never happen again. And it hasn't, so far as I know." Hoden says, "Contraception? No, man, you don't understand. Here on Gideon, we believe that life is the greatest gift. We cannot destroy life or prevent its conception. That goes against our most closely held beliefs. You see, Captain, every sperm is sacred. You're Catholics. Oh, Jesus Christ." Exactly. So, birth control is a red line for you, but you're willing to kill off a presumably very large portion of your population with an infectious disease. That's about the size of it, yeah. But why go through the trouble of constructing a full-scale, exact replica of the Enterprise and trapping me on it with Odonna? Well, see, we're going to need to keep draining your blood to get the space meningitis germs to kill off our people, so we were hoping that you and Odonna would fall in love and that you'd want to stay here voluntarily. With her. But isn't she dying of space meningitis? Hey, look, dude, I never said it was a foolproof plan, okay? While all this has been going on, Spock has contacted a Starfleet admiral in a last-ditch attempt to get permission to beam down to Gideon. The admiral turns him down flat, so Spock says, "Okay, then I'm going anyway." With help from Uhura and Scotty, Spock realizes that the beam-down coordinates given for Captain Kirk and the beam-up coordinates given for the G-Man are different, even though they supposedly refer to the same location. So Spock has himself beamed down to the coordinates given for Kirk. and finds himself aboard the Empty Prize. Spock makes his way to the bridge of the fake Enterprise, and he's like, damn, this is a really good dupe. Accurate in every detail. It's even better than that one they've got in Ticonderoga. Oh, hey, check it out. There's an X-Files museum only like an hour away. Spock returns below decks, takes out a couple of guards in the corridor, neck-pinching one and just tossing the other halfway down the hall, and finds Kirk, Odonna, and Holden in the replica of Kirk's cabin. Kirk's like, hey, Spock! Can you believe this? An exact replica of the Enterprise, perfect in every detail. Not every detail, Captain. I notice there's a copy of the Bible on the bedside table in this version of your cabin. Oh, the Gideons must have left it there. Anyway, this is Odonna. She's sick. She caught a disease from me. I thought you always used protection since, not that kind of disease. She's gonna die. We need to get her to the real Enterprise so Dr. McCoy can help her. Holden protests, saying, I don't know, guys, I really wanted my daughter to die of space meningitis at a young age. How else are we going to encourage other people to volunteer to die of space meningitis? This is a good plan, right? Kirk and Spock ignore Holden. Spock calls the Enterprise, and the three of them are beamed aboard, and before you know it, Odonna has been cured of her space meningitis by Dr. McCoy. Yay! Odonna says, this is great. Now they can take the space meningitis germs from my blood, and we won't need to keep you prisoner anymore. That wasn't really an option at this point anyway. You could stay here. This is the real Enterprise. It's just like the one we were on, only it actually flies. We can visit other planets all across the galaxy. Might be fun. No, I want to stay on my world and spread deadly disease. I'll miss you, though. The end. So the message is, introducing a lethal infection into a society is a valid method of dealing with overpopulation? We're supposed to think what Holden and Odonna are planning to do to the people of Gideon is good? Because, okay, presumably there would be a Prime Directive issue if Kirk tried to stop them, although maybe not, since they're planning on using Kirk's germs to do it. But even apart from that, nobody on the Enterprise has a problem with this? Kirk seems upset at the prospect of Odonna dying, but he is noticeably less than horrified at the prospect of a government planning to kill off its own population using what is essentially a biological weapon. Kirk, as the enlightened 23rd century human, does bring up birth control as a possible solution to Gideon's overpopulation problem. That's nice, particularly when you consider the context in which this episode was made and originally broadcast. It was the late 1960s when birth control, specifically the birth control pill, was a hot-button issue and people, specifically women, had to fight for the right to access it. Thank God that's still not the case today, eh? Ha 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 ha! But after Kirk brings it up and Holden dismisses it by saying, nah, that's against our beliefs, we're going to do the disease thing instead, Kirk just lets it drop. We've got an episode of an extremely political sci-fi show where the plot has to do with overpopulation. The main character suggests using birth control to address that problem at a time when, in real life, birth control is an extremely important and contentious topic. The representative of the overpopulated society objects to using birth control on essentially religious grounds, and the main character says, okay, then never mind, and it never comes up again? What the hell? You know what, though? That's not necessarily a problem. Maybe the producers of Star Trek didn't want to do a birth control episode. Feels a little weird to bring it up for a couple of sentences and then move on, but whatever. Not the story they chose to tell. Fair enough. The problem is, the story they did choose to tell doesn't seem to have any coherent point or message, other than overpopulation is bad, and the government encouraging people to die from an infectious disease is okay as long as the people are free to choose to get infected or not. It's not one of Star Trek's better social commentaries. It's not one of Star Trek's better episodes, period. This is season 3. The budget has been cut, so I understand the necessity to rely more on standing sets. The conceit of trapping Kirk on a replica of the Enterprise is a clever way of justifying shooting most of the episode on the ship, even though Kirk is supposedly somewhere else. But the script doesn't do much to justify that conceit in the story, or make it seem like a reasonable thing for Holden and the other Gideons to have done. The Enterprise is a big ship. These people on a planet so cartoonishly overpopulated that nobody can get anywhere without having to shove through a densely packed crowd somehow found the space and the resources to construct a complete replica of the interior of the entire ship just to try and fool Captain Kirk into falling in love with Odonna and wanting to stay? That doesn't make sense. Nor does Hodin's voluntary infection plan. Are we really supposed to believe that enough people on this planet are going to choose to kill themselves with space meningitis to meaningfully reduce the population? Never mind what a monstrous planet is from a moral standpoint, which it is, even though the episode never truly acknowledges that, which is incredibly fucked up, especially for Star Trek. The plan doesn't seem workable at all from a practical point of view. Hodin's scheme to fix Gideon's population crisis is poorly conceived and full of holes, and given that none of the characters in the episode seem aware of that, I have to conclude that the reason Hodin's plan is so bad is because the writing of this episode is so bad. Beyond the problems with the concept and treatment of Hodin's plan, the episode fails because it's tedious and boring. Spock, McCoy, and the others aboard the real Enterprise are reduced to spending most of the episode arguing with Hodin on the view screen about whether or not they can beam down to Gideon, a dispute which is finally resolved when Spock decides to ignore Hodin and beam down anyway. There's some small amount of, not suspense exactly, but interest generated in the lead up to the reveal of what's actually going on with Kirk and Odonna on the Empty Prize. It's not much. We've been intercutting between the real Enterprise and the replica all along, so we know basically what's going on, and it's not exactly a shock that Hodin and the Gideons know more about Kirk's circumstance than they're letting on to Spock, but at least there's a shred of mystery. Then Hodin walks onto the Empty Prize, explains to Kirk what's going on, and the episode just kinda runs out the clock from there. Kirk and Hodin argue, but the situation is neither escalated nor resolved. Spock shows up, overcomes the token obstacle of the guards outside the room. He and Kirk beam up to the real Enterprise with Odonna, with no resistance from Hodin or the other Gideons, and the episode ends with Odonna apparently returning home to carry out her father's evil and harebrained population control through germ warfare program. It's a long, flat, pointless trudge. The Mark of Gideon was directed by Judd Taylor, who joined the series in the third season and directed several episodes besides this one, and co-written by George F. Slavin and Stanley Adams. This is the only Star Trek writing credit for Slavin and Adams, but, fun fact, Stanley Adams was also an actor, and you'll recognize him as Cyrano Jones from The Trouble with Tribbles. The original concept for this story, pitched by Slavin and Adams, was significantly altered before the episode went into production. There's a summary of their original idea available online. I've read it. It's a lot different in terms of plot, but Hodin's plan is still essentially to use the Enterprise crew to introduce disease into Gideon's society to kill a bunch of people off. There's more of a focus on class distinctions. In the original version, Hodin intends to protect the rulers of Gideon and only unleash the disease on the general population, and the duplicate Enterprise gimmick is absent, but it still reads like the outline for a pretty crummy episode. I think a pretty crummy episode is what this one was destined to be, whatever form it wound up taking. It's all well and good to want to tell a story about overpopulation. I personally think poverty, inequitable distribution of resources, and environmental irresponsibility are far more urgent problems than the total number of humans on the planet, but whatever. If that's the story you want to tell, tell it. But the story of the Mark of Gideon doesn't have anything cogent to say on the subject, and that's a problem for me. That, and, seriously, who the fuck is Mark? Do we ever find out? Those are my thoughts on the Mark of Gideon. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Not the best first pull from the grab bag, was it? Oh well, maybe we'll do better next time when we move from TOS to TAS and review an episode of Star Trek the Animated Series. And that episode will be The Pirates of Orion. That's next week. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.